What is going on, everybody? It's your boy John, and welcome back to Gearbox. So today, got a great video for y'all. I've realized that a lot of times on this channel, we're talking about my cars, my platform, my platforms, my builds, what have you. But I decided today I wanted to kind of switch it up a little bit and talk about some other platforms. There are a lot of them out there. I understand that not everyone is going to be interested in a WRX or a Ford F-150. So let's go ahead and kind of broaden our horizons a little bit, talk about multiple different platforms, so on and so forth. There's a lot of good platforms out there for people to not only get into the car community, but kind of stay attached to that specific car, that specific type of car, as in a hot hatch, for example. But today, by the title and thumbnail, what we're talking about is obviously going to be your top 5, essentially entry-level sports cars. Entry-level cars that you yourself can buy and get into, whether you are 16, just got your license, whether you're 35 years old and said, you know what, I'm going to be a car guy, I'm going to start building cars, I'm going to start learning, whatever. These 5 specific types of cars are going to be great entry-level cars, not going to break the bank, but allow you to have some great fun, not only on the stock platform, but also with aftermarket potential. So without further ado, let's get right into number 1. So starting off for the first entry on the list today, you guessed it, it's going to be a Mazda Miata. For me specifically, I'm talking about the 2nd gen Miata, which is from 1998 to 2005. Now, the reason I picked this is I personally feel that it's the best looking Miata. But 2 is from a price point. I want to make sure I give a nice range of cars from, let's call it cheap, which I know in today's world that's not even really a thing, but cheap to, more expensive, kind of more, I don't know, just depending on your price range, whatever. The 2nd gen Miata is obviously an extremely popular platform for a lot of reasons. First of which, if I were arguing this point, would be price. But it has a lot of good characteristics. Now, I know I've made a point on my channel, I'm not a huge Miata guy, mainly because I'm 6'3", 250 pounds. I like Miatas, I like some of the builds and whatnot, but just doesn't do it for me. But that's not to say it's not a great, entry-level sports car. Now, the 2nd gen Miata is going to have a 140 horsepower motor with a top speed of 130 miles an hour. It's a rear-wheel drive car, comes in a manual transmission. I mean, what more can you ask for out of an entry-level car? Now, that's not to say you can't get one cheaper. Obviously, the older you go, more often than not, the cheaper it's going to be. But also, with the 2nd gen, there's just such a large variety of mint condition Miatas versus just driven to shit and, kind of a fixer-upper type deal. But either way, this is going to be a car that not only is, cheap enough to get into, but it also has a bunch of aftermarket potential, not to mention the fact that it's rear-wheel drive and a manual transmission. I'm not suggesting you do this, but you can do a lot of fun stuff with that combination. No questions asked. So that's why we've got that one at number 1. Coming in on number 2 on the list, we have the Nissan 350Z. The 350Z was produced from 2002 to 2009. You're looking at about 287 horsepower, V6 with the VQ engine in it. Once again, manual transmission, if you opt for it, as well as rear-wheel drive. Now, one of the big things about the 350Z, what made it, in my opinion, what made it very, very popular, and not just a decent little sports car, is obviously going to be Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. I understand he drove the 370, but for this list, you know, we're talking about entry-level sports cars. 370s are a little bit up here. 350s are going to be a little notch below. I personally really want to own a 350Z at one point or another. To be honest with you, I think my next car will be a 350Z. I want to make it a race spec and just gut it, cage it, and go. Phenomenal platform. It's a Nissan. They're reliable. Obviously, every platform is going to have its ups and downs, unfortunately, but a very popular car. And once again, the aftermarket potential there is just top-notch. For an average price, you're looking at about $14,000. Once again, that's not to say that if you look at a older version of the 350 or a more beat-up version of the 350, you can't get them cheaper. But just know that that's kind of the average price range you're looking at. But nonetheless, a phenomenal car for the number 2 spot in this list. Moving right along to the number 3 spot in this list, you guessed it, we're talking about the BRZ Toyota 86 and Scion FRS. This is a 2013 through 2020 model year, so the first gen of this car. I personally am obviously partial to Subarus, but either one of these platforms, they're similar enough to where probably doesn't matter. You're dealing with a boxer engine, naturally aspirated, rear-wheel drive, once again, option for a manual transmission, and overall is just an absolutely phenomenal car. Similar to the Miata though, you know, you're looking at 200 horsepower. By no means is this a extremely powerful car. It's not the fastest car in the world, but I think the characteristics hold similar from the Miata to the BRZ 86 FRS, and the fact that because it's not overly powerful, you actually get to use the entire power band of the platform. And what I mean by that is you can rev this thing out all the way to its red line, shift, downshift, go through corners, a very small, light, nimble platform. Obviously, I opted for the WRX, not the BRZ. I think a lot of that, once again, goes into the fact that I'm a bigger guy. But I still really appreciate all of these builds. And they're not a car that's like super rare necessarily. You see them a lot. But with the aftermarket potential that, you know, these platforms have with a billion other companies, whether it's wide bodies, engine components, suspension components, aero, you name it, a great platform to get into and to be able to, you know, embed yourself in the car community with a car that's actually appreciated in the JDM, you know, realm. I'm a JDM guy. I see these all the time, and to be honest with you, I would say more often than not, I do appreciate and like the builds that I see. My opinion clearly doesn't matter. It really doesn't, but I will say that for whatever reason, whether it's the body lines or whatever, those cars to me seem to be probably one of the greatest bang for your bucks you can get when it comes to that entry-level sports car with a great potential for aftermarket support. I would say one of the only downsides to these cars is the average price. So right now, for an average price of a BRZ FRS 86 first gen, you're looking at about $18,000. I think a lot of this is driven by supply and demand. A lot of people are getting into them, a lot of people like them, and therefore prices are going up. But if you have the cash to spend, it's not a bad choice. And really, where the car market is right now, 18 grand is really not all that bad as an average price when you think about the potential to get into ultimately a car you love and a car that you want to, you know, begin to modify and begin to take to car shows and car meets and whatever. Phenomenal platform, and that's why we've got it at number 3. Coming in at number 4 on this list, we're going to switch it up a little bit. All of the previous cars have been rear-wheel drive, coupes, just the standard thing that people think of when they think about sports cars. So let's go ahead and change gears real quick. Number 4 is going to be the 7th gen Volkswagen GTI. With the GTI, the biggest difference, in my opinion, is that you're dealing with a turbocharged 4-cylinder. Not to say you can't get turbo options on the previous cars, but this one I would say is a more popular option to get the turbo, as well as the fact that this is considered a hot hatch. I don't know about you guys. I absolutely love hot hatches. I don't know that I myself could ever, I guess, see myself driving one or building one, but who knows. But a very, very cool platform nonetheless. I have had the privilege of driving a couple of them, and every time I got in it, it just blew me away. From the power band to the feel of the clutch, the feel of the transmission, it is a phenomenal platform. Now, with the 227 horsepower that inline turbocharged 4-cylinder engine is making, got a top speed of 155 miles an hour in a front-wheel drive configuration. That's obviously going to be another big difference between this number 4 pick and the rest of them. Front-wheel drive, a lot of people love them, a lot of people hate them. The biggest thing with front-wheel drive is obviously going to be torque steer, so as you get into the gas, you might start to feel that wheel turn a little bit, but nonetheless, it's a very sleek-looking car from factory, and there is a whole host of aftermarket support. I actually saw one at a gas station probably a couple weeks ago on bags, wide-bodied, the whole 9 yards, and it was just an extremely, extremely clean build. And I had to just go tell the guy. I'm a guy, I love when I get compliments about my build. So if I see one that I really like, I'm always there to, hey bud, good job. But that 7th gen GTI is a great, great option for you guys as far as an entry-level sports car. Once again, average price coming in at $18,000 for that 7th gen. That's going to be number 4, and I would not sleep on a good old hot hatch. And rounding third, headed home, we're going with number 5. Number 5 is going to be the 5th gen Ford Mustang, built from 2005 to 2014. No list is complete without this one, in my opinion. Once again, manual transmission configuration, rear-wheel drive, and when you start to talk about horsepower for the price that you're paying, this one really starts to kick it in gear, no pun intended. Don't mind me, I'm just going to cheat real quick because I wrote this down. So, in the early versions, you had a 210 horsepower configuration with the V6 engine, and for the turbocharged V8, you bump that up to 300 horsepower. In the later versions of the 5th gen Mustang, the V8 configuration would top out at 412 horsepower. I don't know, maybe you understand this, maybe you don't, but a lot of people today, especially on YouTube, you see 1,000 horsepower Audi R8, 1,000 horsepower Supra, 1,000 horsepower this, 1,000 horsepower that. What a lot of people don't realize is that is a shitload of power. The fact that a later gen Mustang can put 400 plus wheel horsepower to the ground, rear wheel drive, that's low-key scary to think that some people that don't know what they're doing can actually get their hands on that much power for, relatively speaking, that cheap of a platform. Not to mention, I think it just is a great looking car. I think it's a timeless design. To be honest with you, this one has a special place in my heart. I learned to drive on a 5th gen Mustang. My cousin Brandon, he had a 5th gen Mustang. He's a couple years older than me. Had, full exhaust and all this sort of stuff on it. And it was just a badass car. And I learned to drive stick on it. And ever since then, I've just had a soft spot right here for Mustangs, but specifically that 5th gen. I just think it is a absolutely phenomenal platform, and that cannot go unrecognized. With an average price of $16,000, this is going to come in kind of middle tier as far as this list goes. But once again, guys, depending on what you're looking for. If you want a straight line car, if you want a nimble car, this one definitely isn't it for you. But for the straight line, Mustang is going to be it. 16 grand for an average price. You can get a hell of a lot of horsepower as far as bang for your buck goes, and that is pretty impressive in my book. Now, the one downside to this car is it does tend to have a magnet attached to it, specifically for large crowds of people. So if you maybe feel like you can't handle that pressure, I wouldn't even go for it. That's going to be it for another episode of Gearbox, guys. If you like this video, give it a big fat thumbs up. If you have any more suggestions, comments, questions, concerns, whatever, drop them in the comment section down below. As always, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. You know the drill. And until next time, peace.